Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Parsha Pearls. And this week we're going to look at something a little bit different, because there's one common theme that we find throughout the various Torah portions at the moment, and that is Moshe's stick. He has a stick. Wherever he goes, he's taking his stick with him. There's a fascinating, detailed discussion amongst this week's Parsha Pearls, amongst many of the commentaries about the significance of that stick. There are fascinating midrashim that tell us about the origins of this stick, some suggesting that the stick actually was already implanted in the Garden of Eden at the beginning of time, and that ultimately it was something that was passed on from Adam to his son, and ultimately to Noah, and ultimately from Noah to his son, eventually Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and eventually Jacob took it down with him to Egypt, and in Egypt, initially, Pharaoh took it, Joseph had it, Pharaoh took it, and then Yisro, who was Moshe's father-in-law, got hold of this stick at one point, which is why we find that he had to go on the run. He left Pharaoh, and he went off to Midian. And when he's in this country of Midian, he took that stick and implanted it in his garden. And the way the Medrash records the detail of that story is that anybody who asked for any of his daughters in marriage would have to prove themselves by going out into the garden and trying to take that stick. And most often, in fact, every time that might have happened, they perished in the process. However that happened, got swallowed up in the ground, whatever it was. So when Moshe proposed to Tzipporah and asked for her hand in marriage, she gave him the heads up. This is my dad's condition. You got to get the stick out of the garden. And so he proceeds to do so. He goes into the garden and takes the stick and brings it out and brings it back. And then Yisro immediately, or Tzipporah, his wife-to-be, certainly recognizes that this is not an ordinary individual. This is clearly somebody very special. And then the Medrash goes into all kinds of discussions about how Yisro reacted and locked him away in a cellar for a long time, etc. Not for now. But the stick, therefore, is a unique stick. It's I don't know, call it a magical stick, whatever you will. The question is this: everywhere he goes, God tells him to use his stick. Why? I get it. It has certain unique spiritual powers. It's with that stick. When he makes his initial entry onto the Jewish scene, that God says, take it, throw it down. It'll turn into a snake. All the 10 plagues pretty much involved a stick. Take your stick, the sand, hit the sand, take your stick, raise it to the heavens with the hailstones, etc. When it comes to the crossing of the sea, take your stick and raise it over the waters. When they needed drinking water in the desert, take your stick and hit the rock. What is this stick? Where can I get one? I mean, the imagination runs wild with opportunity. I raise my stick, and all of a sudden, all of Mill Hill come flocking into Shul. So here's a different perspective on the stick, apart from the magical side of it. A well-known secret in the Mill Hill community is that I have a friend. He's a 6'2" Rastafarian by the name of Rax, who came into my house about maybe 10 years ago now to train me in Muay Thai, a very violent form of martial arts. You don't want to mess with this rabbi, and it comes with occupational hazards. Like the time that Rax and I were sparring, and I threw a kick up to his chin, and he came down with his elbow, and crack, he smashed my toe. It was exceptionally painful. Nothing broke in the end, thank God, but I couldn't walk on it for a couple of weeks, triggered gout in the toe, whatever. The following week, I'm lying there on the couch feeling sorry for myself, and there's a knock on the door. It was Rax. I thought, nice of him to visit, but for the fact that he's carrying his pads, and he's carrying all of his other equipment, and I'm looking at him, and I said, Rax, what are you doing? I can't. And he just looked at me and said, your other foot is working, man. So are your hands. Come on. Nothing to you, as he loves to say. How often do we find ourselves saying, I can't? We all have ambitions. We have grand goals of sorts. We start out in life dreaming of being Superman or Superwoman, but many of us have lived enough years to know that our greatest dreams have a persistent habit of falling away. We tell ourselves, you know what, maybe I can't fly after all. In fact, sometimes it would seem that the greater our ambitions are, and the more committed we are to achieving them, the more quickly we lose our way. So the question to consider then is this: is the dream really unobtainable, out of reach, too unrealistic? Or do we simply give up on them or on ourselves too quickly? When summoned at the burning bush to become leader of the Jewish people, 3 times Moses says to God, I can't. And the Torah tells us God got angry, rages against Moses. If I present you with a challenge, then clearly you can. And then God immediately asks Moses, what's in your hand? Why? Well, that brings us back to Rax, my trainer. All he was looking to teach me was that your weaknesses, some of them are real. The toe really was damaged, but there's still more you can do that you don't otherwise realize. So you could give up at the first hurdle, or you could discover your inner greatness and work with what you do have to go on to achieve what you were meant to achieve, to go on to achieve great things. Moses says to God, my speech is slow and broken. I can't. Find somebody else to do it. God says, what's in your hand? Moses says, a stick. God says, throw down the stick, it turns into a snake, etc. When Moses says, I can't, God's retort is, what's in your hand? Your speech is broken? Okay, take what you have in your hand, work with whatever does work, and that's how you will achieve your greatness. When King David asks, who am I to go up against the giant Goliath? I can't. God says, what's in your hand? A slingshot. Use that and you'll accomplish what you need to do. When Queen Esther complains it's been more than 30 days that the king has called me, I can't go rescue my people, she too ultimately takes what's at her disposal, in that instance a feast, to bring Haman down. And when Pharaoh's daughter stands by the edge of the water and she sees the basket with baby Moses inside, and she actually has nothing in her hand, then she just uses her hand. In the words of the verse, she stretched out her hand, and God took it the rest of the distance, whereby she was able to rescue Moses. In life, there are always reasons, excuses, if you will, to slow the pace. Family, health, profession. And in those moments, our minds take over and tell us, I am so discouraged, I feel like quitting. I'm facing so many problems, I just don't believe I can overcome them. And we feel depleted. And sometimes we want to actually give up. But know this, per the words of the Talmud, if a challenge presents itself to you, then that is your burning bush moment when God is saying to you, here's an opportunity for you to celebrate like never before your own power, your own ability to get yourself to do whatever is necessary. And to be sure, most often these challenges are not intended to test our weaknesses, but actually to discover our latent strengths. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do have something within you to enable you to keep moving forward and reach your destination. So whatever the challenge, there's always also the tenacity to overcome it. However tired one might be, however worn one might be, there's always the ability to dig deep and carry on. At the turn of the 20th century, a Jewish chemist called Paul Ehrlich was struggling to find a cure for syphilis, which brought suffering to so many. And when at long last he found the cure, he called it compound 606. Why 606? Because it was preceded by 605 failed attempts. After 7 long years of trying 605 different compounds, Ehrlich finally found compound 606 that worked. And he saved countless lives, and he won a Nobel Prize. Imagine had he lacked the stamina to endure so many failures. Had he said, I can't, the cure might have never been found. And his story, therefore, shines a light on just how much we can accomplish if we persist in the pursuit of our grander ambitions, even when failure all too often seems to taunt us. The point is that, as Moshe teaches us, and the message of his stick is very, very clear, and that is simply the fact that mindset is everything. You know, it's always believed that nobody could run a mile in under 4 minutes until 1954, when Roger Bannister did exactly that. And in that same year, 4 other athletes did exactly the same thing. Was there something in the air that wasn't there before? New sneakers being made by Nike? Or was it a psychological barrier that, once proven that it can be done, altered the mindset, enabling others to do the same? And in life, there are always reasons, excuses, if you will, to slow ourselves down, like we said. And therefore, we have to realize that God never overimposes upon his creation. Whatever the darkness, there's always the greater light that beckons. However tired, there's always the ability to dig deep, summon that second wind, and cross that finish line. God has defined, as he communicated to Moshe very strongly and passionately, a specific role for each of us, with exclusive accomplishments unique to our individuality. There is something I am meant to be able to do that nobody else can do. There's somebody that I am meant to become that nobody else can become. That's why God brought me into being in the first instance. He doesn't duplicate. Every one of us is unique. When God created everything en masse, a multitude of stars, vast oceans, an abundance of vegetation, an entire animal kingdom, man was created alone, singular. Why? Our rabbis tell us so that he can say, for me was this world created. And if this world was created for me, then I can do something with it, make something of it. And this is key. What you can become, that's already preordained, predetermined from above. Whether you become it, that's down to your free choice, to how you maximize your potential, to the extent that you grab life with both hands and run with it. And sometimes, therefore, we simply need to stand outside ourselves and look in order to capture a glimpse of a larger vision of ourselves. Maybe that's why after the burning bush experience, Moses was gone for such a long period of time. We must look to discover who we are, our uniqueness, and what it is we bring to this world. What places do you feel drawn to? What kinds of things make your heart beat faster when you think about them? What do you dream about and long to do? As the famous Baal Shem Tov put it, wherever you find yourself, divine providence brought you there. By definition, there is something there available to you to unleash your greatness and discover your inner hero. And then it becomes a question about whether you'll rise to the challenge or squander the opportunity. So, as God says to Moshe, you find life sometimes difficult. I say to you, it's not because things are difficult that we don't dare, because we don't dare that they're difficult. You find that one added spiritual undertaking threatening. I say to you, every shot you don't take is a guaranteed miss. And frankly, if you find reaching beyond your comfort zone too risky, I say to you, if you don't risk anything, you risk even more. There's a story, Mexico City, 1968. John Stephen Akhwari of Tanzania started the Olympic marathon with all the other runners hours before, but he finished it alone. And when he finally arrived at the stadium, but a few spectators remained in the stands. The winner of the marathon crossed the finish line well over a couple of hours earlier. It was getting dark. His right leg was bandaged, heavily bleeding. He's obviously in great pain, but he crossed the finish line, suffering from fatigue, from dehydration, from disorientation. And a reporter asked him, why didn't you just quit? And he thought for a moment and he said, my country didn't send me here to start the race. My country sent me here to finish it. Think about those words. The moment you're born into the world, you are in a race. In fact, the word for race in Greek is agon, from which we get the English word agony, because being in a race means that along the way you endure inevitable hardship. That's just part of life. But life calls for the discipline of an athlete, the endurance of a marathon runner, and the determination of a champion. Yes, you might struggle, but don't despair. God didn't put you here to start your race. He put you here to finish yours. The important thing is to stay the course, to keep focused on the end goal, go at your pace, but be sure to cross the finish line. Because in life, you're obligated not necessarily to win, but to keep trying and do the best you can every day. If you have an area of vulnerability in your life, just work around it, like healing any part of your body. Sometimes you can cure the very part that's damaged. Other times you just strengthen the muscles all around it. You know, Beethoven started to go deaf at the age of 20, and he still went on to compose masterpieces. Mozart started playing music at 3 and composed already at 5. They're gifted. They have a talent. Could I be a brilliant musician? Maybe. I don't know till I try, but in all likelihood, I could be good, maybe even real good. But either way, I don't necessarily have that musical ability. I wasn't born with that talent. Why him, not me? That's God's business. So far as I'm concerned, God made me to be as great as I can be. I could be brilliant in a million other ways. And finally, long before Columbus discovered America, some Europeans believed that if you sail west across the ocean far enough, you would reach land. So a group of expert Portuguese sailors decided they would test the theory. They sailed 25 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. They saw nothing. 70 miles, still nothing. At 100 miles, nothing. They then returned and announced their verdict. There's nothing there. Of course, a whole new world lay over the horizon waiting to be discovered. But after a tentative abortive effort, they rendered the verdict, nothing there. And as Columbus was to demonstrate later on, there was in fact quite a lot there for those who had the perseverance to sail on. Moshe's stick teaches us, never make the mistake of the Portuguese sailors. Never truncate your voyages of discovery and pronounce nothing there. Keep forging ahead. Never underestimate the power you have when you tenaciously pursue your dreams in order to make them real. There's always something in your hand and in your ability to make it happen. And as per God's message to Moshe, and one we can take away with us tonight, is that ultimately the difference between who you are and who you could be lies in what you ultimately get yourself to do. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.